Ladies and gentlemen, do you know what happens when the world's strongest power chooses sides? It shakes the ground beneath alliances. It sends waves through borders, economies, and national dreams. And today, what we are witnessing is not just strategy, not just policy. It is a shift that holds the potential to rewrite the balance of power in South Asia. The question is not whether America is supporting Pakistan against India. That's evident. The real question is why, and that's what most people are too afraid to ask, too blind to see, or too distracted to understand. America does not move without a reason. It never has. Every handshake carries a price. Every alliance has a purpose. Nothing is done for the sake of kindness or brotherhood. There are interests, layers of them, often buried beneath diplomatic smiles. And when a country like America leans toward Pakistan, despite the military strength, the economic rise, and the global favor India has earned, you must stop and ask what's behind that move. It begins with geography. It always does. You cannot ignore the map. Pakistan sits at a location so critical that ignoring it would be a strategic disaster for any superpower. It connects the Middle East with Central Asia. It neighbors China, Afghanistan, and Iran. It's a corridor, a passageway, a pressure point. Control that space, and you control influence across three major regions. That's not theory, that's hard, strategic reality. Now combine that geography with influence. Pakistan has deep roots in the Islamic world. Its connections span across the Gulf, the Arab world, and Central Asia. It has relationships that India has tried but never quite managed to replicate. That kind of influence isn't built in a day, and America knows it. In times of war, in moments of chaos, access to that network is not optional. It's essential. But there's more. It's about leverage. If you want to pressure one country, you build up the country next to it. If you want influence over a rising power like India, you quietly strengthen its rival. That's not betrayal, that's politics, realpolitik. Power plays to control, you must first create a counterbalance. And Pakistan, with its military apparatus, nuclear capability, and history of rivalry, becomes the perfect counterweight. And then there is the war on terror. America may no longer be officially fighting in Afghanistan, but its fingerprints are still all over the region. Pakistan is a gatekeeper to that region's intelligence. It has eyes and ears on movements, groups, activities that the West is desperate to track. Without that cooperation, America's influence in the region crumbles. It becomes blind, and no superpower tolerates blindness. Add to that the weapons trade, the flow of aid, the backroom agreements that never reach the media. Pakistan has, over the years, created an infrastructure that America helped build. Bases, intelligence agencies, and operational corridors have created dependency. It's not just Pakistan depending on the West, it's mutual. When you build a machine together, you need the other part to make it run. And now let's talk about fear, not weakness, not paranoia, strategic fear, the kind that powerful nations use to justify investments. America knows that instability in Pakistan would mean regional collapse. Refugees flooding into neighboring nations, extremism surging across borders, and unchecked nuclear power spiraling out of control. That fear pushes policymakers to keep Pakistan close, even when the global optics don't support the decision. It's not about trust, it's about containment. India, on the other hand, is rising economically, militarily, politically, and when a nation rises, it becomes proud, confident, independent. That independence threatens control. It threatens the idea of one global authority, and America, historically, has struggled with equals. It prefers influence, dependence, cooperation that can be directed. So when India speaks of multipolarity, of national pride, of choosing its own path, it's not celebrated, it's monitored. So what happens? America leans on Pakistan, quietly, deliberately, to send a message, to remind the region that no one walks away unchecked. It's a reminder that alliances are not guaranteed, they are earned, maintained, controlled, and in this equation, Pakistan becomes the instrument of reminder. People often confuse support with friendship, but power doesn't think in those terms. Power thinks in terms of access, dominance, timing. If supporting Pakistan grants America more leverage, more influence, more control, it will do it regardless of loyalty elsewhere. It's not personal, it's strategic. Now look at the global game. China is rising. The Belt and Road Initiative has redefined trade routes. Pakistan is a key part of that vision. The China-Pakistan economic corridor isn't just an infrastructure project. It's a geopolitical pivot. And America knows that if it doesn't anchor itself in that corridor, it loses the future. It loses the next phase of global trade. That's not an option for a superpower struggling to maintain supremacy. And so it doubles down diplomatically, militarily, financially, not to save Pakistan, but to maintain relevance, to have a seat at the table, to counter China's growing grip. This is not about choosing Pakistan over India. It's about not being pushed out of the region entirely. It's about survival of dominance. India, for all its strengths, is not easily influenced. It makes its own decisions. It signs deals with Russia, flirts with multipolar leadership, questions Western hypocrisy. That doesn't sit well with a country that built its empire on leading, not following. And so the shift begins, not a betrayal, but a correction, a new axis. America reminds the region that it can still choose favorites, but this is where the truth becomes powerful. Nations must not beg for approval. Strength is not given, it is built, and when one country receives support today, it does not mean the other has lost. It means the game is still being played. It means the match is not over. That's the lesson here. That strength is not proven by who supports you, but by how you act when support is denied. America's support for Pakistan is not permanent. It's conditional. It's driven by calculations that shift with time. When one variable changes, so does the equation. The real test is not who receives backing, but who builds beyond it, who can sustain growth, develop self-reliance, stand strong without a global lifeline. This is where the challenge lies, in knowing that being overlooked is not a curse. It's an opportunity, a call to rise above manipulation, to become so powerful that support becomes irrelevant. That's the only real power in a world where loyalty is always negotiable. America may support Pakistan today, but what happens tomorrow depends on how India responds. Will it double down on its sovereignty, invest in its people, its infrastructure, its global outreach, or will it try to win back support through appeasement? One path leads to dependency, the other leads to unshakable respect. This is a lesson every country must learn, that when the scales tip, you don't beg for balance, you become the counterweight, you rise. Not to match, but to surpass, not to follow, but to lead, and leadership is not loud. It's not found in declarations or ceremonies. It's found in resilience, in innovation, in building systems that outlast alliances. America plays the long game, but it's not the only one who can. Greatness is not inherited. It is forged in pressure, in silence, in moments of being overlooked, underestimated, doubted. That's when real power takes shape. When you're left alone, you're free to build, free to experiment, free to fail and rise again. That's the secret no one tells you, that being ignored by power is a gift, because it forces you to create your own. So when you see support going elsewhere, don't despair. See it for what it is: a test, a mirror, a challenge, and respond not with anger, but with clarity, with discipline, with vision, because the world respects not those who are supported, but those who rise without it. In every age, the world has chosen favorites. Sometimes the choice made sense, sometimes it didn't, but history doesn't reward those who were favored. It rewards those who were prepared, ready, relentless. Nations that weren't given a chance, but took it anyway. Countries that weren't chosen, but chose themselves. That's the path to real strength. The path of silence, grit, patience. The willingness to wait, to work, to walk the hard road. Not because someone believes in you, but because you believe in yourself. That's unshakable. That's what outlives alliances, support, headlines. That's what turns nations into legends. Support will come and go, but what you build, how you think, what you stand for, that stays, that defines you, that decides how history remembers you. And in this shifting world, only one question matters: will you rise when no one is watching? Because that's where greatness begins, in silence, in solitude, in the decision to rise anyway. People often wonder why America doesn't fully back India, a rising economic power, a democracy, a technology hub. But that question misunderstands the nature of strategic partnerships. America does not support based on ideals, it supports based on utility, and while India may represent long-term alignment in values, Pakistan represents immediate alignment in geography. That's not something easily dismissed. It's not romantic. It's not emotional. It's tactical, cold, precise, necessary. This support doesn't mean unconditional alliance. It doesn't mean trust. It means value. Calculated, measured, strategic value. If Pakistan were to lose that value, support would fade. But as long as it holds that position, as long as it remains a bridge between regions, a gatekeeper to territories America cannot afford to ignore, the support will continue. And this is what separates nations that matter from those that don't. Geography may not change, but how a country uses it does. Pakistan has built a foreign policy around its location. It has survived isolation, conflict, sanctions, and pressure by reminding the world that it cannot be bypassed. That's the kind of resilience that global powers take seriously, and America, driven by interests and necessity, pays attention to that kind of resilience. Geography may seem like a passive factor, but in the right hands it becomes a weapon, a tool, a form of soft dominance, and in a region where every move is watched, every route contested, and every alliance temporary, the ability to offer something unique like unmatched access is priceless. That's the real reason why America continues to support Pakistan, even when other alliances appear more natural. Because in the game of global power, access beats ideals and relevance beats promises. And Pakistan, by virtue of where it stands on the map, remains one of the most relevant players in the world's most dangerous neighborhood. In every region of the world where power begins to shift, there emerges a need for balance. Not just for peace, but for influence. When one nation rises too quickly, too confidently, others begin to act, not necessarily out of fear, but out of the desire to maintain control over outcomes. South Asia is no different. India's rise in recent decades has been undeniable. Economically, it has grown into one of the largest markets on the planet. Militarily, it continues to modernize and expand its capabilities. Politically, it asserts its independence on the global stage, choosing its own path rather than blindly aligning with any single bloc. This creates both admiration and concern. Admiration for its progress, concern for the diminishing influence others may have over it. America sees this clearly, It recognizes India's potential as a global player, but with that potential comes a shift in attitude, a confidence that resists being steered, a pride that refuses to be dictated to, and for a nation like the United States, which has long thrived on directing global policy, this independence can be difficult to manage. So what does it do? It looks toward the rival, toward the neighbor with historical tensions, toward the nation that still relies, that still negotiates, that still needs. Supporting Pakistan is not a gesture of trust or affection. It is a calculated move to maintain equilibrium, to remind India that dominance is never uncontested, to ensure that no matter how far India rises, there is always a counterforce nearby, backed quietly but firmly. This is a centuries-old tactic in international relations, balance through opposition. It worked in Europe, it worked in the Middle East, and now it's being applied in South Asia. By keeping Pakistan strong enough, America ensures that India cannot fully dictate regional affairs without consequence. Every move India makes must be calculated with awareness of how Pakistan might respond, and every move Pakistan makes is amplified by the quiet support it receives from global powers. This keeps both nations in a state of strategic tension. And in that tension, America finds relevance. It becomes the broker, the influencer, the silent hand behind the curtain. This isn't about taking sides. It's about keeping both sides from becoming too strong alone. If one country becomes too powerful, alliances begin to shift, and the balance America depends on begins to fade. But if power is carefully distributed, influence can be maintained from the outside. This is the true reason behind continued support for Pakistan. Not because it offers more in terms of economy or diplomacy, but because it offers just enough to prevent the region from being defined by a single dominant force. That kind of balance, once established, allows for maneuvering, negotiation, and control without direct interference. And in the modern world, influence without visibility is the most effective kind. In the realm of global security, intelligence is the invisible thread that ties together strategy, diplomacy, and military action. It is not about what the world sees. It's about what power knows before the world even looks. And in regions plagued by instability, extremism, and shifting allegiances, intelligence becomes the most valuable currency. This is why America, despite its overwhelming military might and advanced surveillance technology, has remained dependent on Pakistan's cooperation for decades, because in places like Afghanistan, intelligence cannot be gathered from satellites alone. It requires networks on the ground, human insight, cultural understanding, and proximity to threats that are fluid, hidden, and deeply embedded. Pakistan has all of that. It has spent years cultivating intelligence frameworks that reach across borders, into tribal areas, into underground movements that the West cannot access on its own. These networks have been shaped not only by proximity, but by history. Pakistan has navigated the complex terrain of Afghan politics and insurgency since long before global powers took notice. When America entered Afghanistan after 9/11, it needed more than firepower. It needed guidance. It needed allies who understood the language, the terrain, the loyalties, and the risks. And Pakistan, whether by design or necessity, became that ally. Over the years, countless operations were launched with intelligence that flowed through Pakistani channels. High-value targets were located, movements were tracked, safe houses were uncovered, not by chance, but through cooperation with those who had eyes on the ground. This relationship, though often strained publicly, remained deeply functional in private. Because when lives are on the line and objectives are urgent, practicality outweighs public perception. Even during moments of diplomatic tension, the intelligence cooperation never fully broke. It couldn't. because the cost of losing access was too high. Beyond Afghanistan, Pakistan's role in counterterrorism operations extended to broader global networks. Extremist groups with reach beyond borders often find temporary refuge or movement through South and Central Asia. America, in its efforts to disrupt these networks, relies on partners that can see and act where it cannot. Pakistan has become one of those partners, not because it's always aligned in vision, but because it remains uniquely positioned to contribute. This dependency goes both ways. America supplies technology, training, and funding. Pakistan offers access, field intelligence, and strategic cooperation. It's a relationship born out of necessity, not ideology. And while other alliances may shift with elections or headlines, this bond endures because it serves core interests. Intelligence is not optional for global powers. It is essential. And when a nation like Pakistan can offer real-time, actionable intelligence in one of the world's most volatile regions, that nation becomes indispensable. This is why, regardless of public narratives, regardless of debates around trust or alignment, the alliance continues. Because in the world of national security, outcomes matter more than optics. And as long as threats remain and missions require precision, America will continue to rely on the intelligence, cooperation Pakistan provides. In the unfolding geopolitical rivalry between America and China, every road, port, and trade route becomes part of a larger strategy. The battle is no longer just about weapons or military dominance. It's about influence, infrastructure, and economic direction. And in this high-stakes game, Pakistan has emerged as one of the most critical pieces on the board, not because of its wealth or power, but because of where it sits and who it connects. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a flagship project of China's Belt and Road Initiative, has turned Pakistan into a central player in the global race for connectivity, trade, and influence. That alone is enough to draw America's focused attention. This corridor is not just a series of roads or energy pipelines. It's a statement, a direct link between Western China and the Arabian Sea through Gwadar Port, bypassing the traditional shipping routes dominated by the United States and its allies. It offers China a shorter, safer, and more cost-effective path to the Middle East and Africa. This reduces its reliance on maritime routes like the Strait of Malacca, which can be controlled or disrupted in times of conflict. That shift changes everything. If China can move goods, resources, and energy through a friendly corridor built on land under its influence, it becomes less vulnerable and more assertive. Pakistan enables that vision. It offers the terrain, the access, the cooperation, and in return, it receives infrastructure, investment, and political backing. But for America, this partnership between China and Pakistan is not just a regional development, it's a global challenge. Because every successful corridor China builds expands its sphere of influence and reduces Western leverage. That means America must respond, and one of the few ways to do so is to remain engaged with Pakistan, even if the relationship is complex. By staying involved, America doesn't just monitor developments, it competes. It offers alternative partnerships, economic incentives, and diplomatic engagement to ensure that Pakistan doesn't fall entirely under Beijing's control. Total Chinese dominance in Pakistan would be a strategic setback. It would hand China a permanent foothold in South Asia, near the Gulf, and close to key American interests. That's a scenario Washington cannot accept quietly. This is why support for Pakistan remains steady, even when it confuses observers. It's not about rewarding behavior or strengthening alliances for show. It's about staying in the game. About ensuring that China doesn't gain uncontested influence in a region that is becoming more central to global trade and power with each passing year. If America were to pull back completely, it would leave a vacuum. And China would be more than ready to fill it. Maintaining that balance requires effort, investment, dialogue, cooperation in areas that may not make headlines but matter deeply to long-term strategy. America cannot afford to let the China-Pakistan partnership evolve unchecked. By engaging Pakistan, even indirectly, it preserves its own strategic interests and slows the momentum of its greatest global competitor. That's not just smart policy, it's survival in an era where power is being redrawn by roads, ports, and corridors that stretch far beyond national borders. In a world driven by alliances, global influence, and external support, it's easy to forget the most timeless truth. Real power comes from within, not from who approves, not from who funds, and certainly not from who praises. Nations, like individuals, often fall into the trap of seeking validation, believing that strength lies in recognition or inclusion. But the strongest countries in history weren't born from outside approval. They were forged in hardship, in isolation, in the fire of necessity and the quiet grind of resilience. That's where real national power begins, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. When support shifts away, when alliances weaken, it feels like rejection. But it's not. It's a signal, a call to build, a call to stop waiting and start creating. The nations that rise the highest are those that know how to stand alone, not because they choose loneliness, but because they understand that dependency always comes with a cost. When help comes with conditions, progress becomes a negotiation, vision gets diluted, and greatness becomes something borrowed instead of something earned. Self-reliance is not isolation. It's not the absence of cooperation. It's the foundation beneath it. A country that stands firm without crutches is the one that walks strongest when it does receive support. It no longer begs for investment. It attracts it. It no longer follows strategy. It creates it. That transformation begins the moment a nation stops waiting to be chosen and chooses itself. Being overlooked is often seen as defeat, but it can be a gift. The absence of noise creates clarity. The lack of attention opens space for innovation. Great nations have risen when no one believed in them. They built infrastructure when the world dismissed them. They educated their people when no one offered help. They created industries from scratch, systems from nothing, and movements that echoed far beyond borders. Not because someone helped, but because no one did. That kind of strength is unshakable. It doesn't collapse when funding is pulled. It doesn't panic when alliances shift. It adjusts, it adapts, it grows. And in time, the world turns to look, not out of charity, but out of necessity, because nations that rise on their own terms become magnets. They gain influence not by asking for it, but by embodying it. The temptation to seek approval is powerful, especially when others receive support, but comparison is a trap. Each nation has its own path, its own trials, and its own timing. True greatness comes from mastering that path, no matter how hard or how slow. It comes from waking up each day with the will to move forward, whether the world applauds or not. That's the discipline that builds legacies. In the long run, the world respects independence more than alignment. It admires strength that comes from self, belief more than borrowed power, because the nations that rise without help become examples. Their stories become lessons, and their futures become models others try to replicate. Not because they were chosen, but because they chose themselves every single time.